Go. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Adeel Pirzada podcast. My name is Kevin. I am a co-host of this podcast today. Very blessed to be with you. We have a very established guest that we're going to be interviewing and getting to know over time for the next 55 minutes. I'm so excited to introduce him as well. Before we get into it, my name is Kevin, business development and project manager with Pircon Group. We are commercial general contractors. We can help with commercial construction, mainly for your restaurant and retail space. We are getting into many different other spaces in real estate, but I don't want to share to confuse you, and we will at the right time. So if you're interested in learning more about what we do, go ahead and click that link down below, pircongroup.com, and to learn more information and to get a quote for your project. Let's do this. Awesome, man. I'm very blessed to have here today someone that I've known for many years and someone who has been my mentor and friend and someone I learn from and learn with all the time. And just not even by being around him, but just looking at his emails and all that stuff and watching him speak. I'm very blessed to introduce a good friend of mine, someone I've known from Toastmasters, who is a distinguished Toastmaster. We met at a public speaking conference. He is established commercial real estate agent, 38 years as a licensed agent. He is the publisher of the famous and respected magazine that is online, Facility Calgary and Monday Morning Minute, popular in the Calgary professional space. And like I said, he's a distinguished Toastmaster, which is a DTM. I'm proud to introduce my friend and mentor, Mark Kolke.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I'm happy to be here. And people should know that it doesn't just mean distinguished Toastmaster, it means don't time me. But I'm happy to be here, and I'm honored that you would invite me. And I hope we have some good discussion. We've had sort of a preamble ourselves to figure out what we're going to talk about. So
yeah, for sure.
Take it away, man. You're the host.
Yes. So, I've been really planning this podcast for a while and just wanting to get you on. And it's you're a hard man to reach. But we're going to be joking around today on this podcast. So hope you get your laughter out at the right time.
I'm not hard to reach, Kevin. It's just, I'm not as young as you, so I'm not out late at night. So I'm usually, in bed early, and you can reach me anytime, 24/7.
For sure. Now today we have some great topics about commercial real estate, especially the office and industrial space. I know our podcast has a lot of different listeners, especially on LinkedIn, and a lot of people who are in the CRE space and just real estate and construction space. So I hope you're ready to learn more about Mark and his journey and the lessons he's taken during his 38 years being an agent and his expertise in commercial. So I do have some questions here. Please get your notepads out like I do for mine and be ready to learn. So the first question that I have for you, Mark, is how do you see the office and industrial market going now for you?
Well, I guess the easy answer is good, and the two-word answer is not good, and the three-word answer is not good enough. The office market, for anyone who's read any news in the last 2 or 3 years, is terrible. There's tons of space in Calgary, and most landlords would agree that vacancy rates of 30% or higher in a lot of buildings is true. And you might say, well, how does that square with what a bunch of brokerage firms are reporting and journalists are reporting? Is that a building has a percentage vacancy, meaning the amount of space in the building that isn't attracting rent. And then there's other space in the building that's vacant because it's on the market for sublease or as a byproduct of a tenant agreeing to, renegotiating their lease and downsizing their space or moving to another building. So they might be paying rent need space in building A, but they move to building B, and there's an overlap period of time there. So the long and the short is there's a ton of space, and if you're a significant user, you need a full floor of space or 10 full floors of space. There's lots of space around. If you're a smaller tenant, needing not as much space, or a startup, there's a shortage of supply almost always in that 1,000 feet to 2,000 square feet space. There's lots of them, but they're occupied. So that there tends to be less vacancy in that category of size for tenants than there is for larger tenants in the Calgary market. And of course, the downtown market, high-rise office space, the vacancy rates are really high. The operating costs and taxes are very high as well. Beltline and suburban spaces, the operating costs tend to fall because the property tax component is lower and the complexity of the building to run. Therefore, the operating costs that are passed through to a tenant for, elevators, for instance, aren't as costly in a 4-story building as they are in a 40-story building downtown. So there's a relativity to that. And so the further that you go from the center of the city, you find lower cost real estate, therefore lower taxes, and smaller buildings where the operating costs are lower. And typically, when the market is terrible, which we've had for a number of years now, and historically, when there's a lot of vacancy in downtown and high-quality buildings, you have a flight to quality. People in average buildings downtown try to migrate into better buildings that, because of the economy, are available at a lower cost. People in Beltline and suburban areas want to move to better space, better buildings downtown. That's typically. But in the post-pandemic period, we're dealing with a new reality. People are figuring out how they office, and most people haven't figured that out yet because it's an HR problem as well as a facilities problem. And the other thing is the market was pretty bad before the pandemic arrived. I mean, the rest of Canada was okay, but Calgary, oil patch downturn, things were really rough here. There were people saying, well, we're just overbuilt, and people would say, well, no, we're just not selling enough oil. And it was a mixed bag. And then the pandemic hit. Recovering from that, of course, Alberta is doing very well, but the office use hasn't grown because companies have downsized a bit. They've become more efficient. They've also learned how to work remotely. So whether they're everybody back in the office now or you can stay home if you want, that's still a mixed bag where companies large and small haven't figured out yet what they want to do. Some are focused on, we think we train people and manage people better if everybody's in the office. And at the other end of the spectrum, there are people saying, well, recruitment and retention, particularly of younger workers, is really important to us. And we found ways that we can work remotely. We get better work out of people if they have more control over the schedule. I guess it depends on the job and the industry. I think most employers, when they're really candid, will say, we don't have the confidence that people are working as hard or as effective, and we can't not keeping an eye on them. But I think the general consensus of everybody is that new employees and training that you used to do hands-on with people sitting at the desk next to you, that's lost. So that's a tough challenge that large organizations, I'm involved, I'm on the board of IFMA Calgary, which is the International Facility Managers Association. We're planning a conference on this very subject soon in Calgary, probably in May. And our organization with large employers globally, every market around the planet right now is wrestling with this same issue. So Calgary's problem is larger because of a legacy of a lot more vacancy to begin with. But we're facing the same thing of how do you revitalize downtown, and will people office the same way in the future as they have in the past? And the answer is no. But when you try to drill down, well, what will that be? Almost everybody you scratch gives you a different answer. So there's employers and HR people within employers that are divided themselves over what's the right way to recruit employees today and retain them. And it varies industry to industry and different levels of an organization. Sorry to give you a long roundabout answer there. Flip side of that, and very interesting, I think, in terms of trends everybody reads the news or listens to the news. Calgary's getting a lot of in-migration again, as is Alberta generally, but Calgary in particular, a very desirable place to be. A lot of companies that weren't here before are relocating.
Right.
sometimes with more hype about how many people they'll employ than they actually do initially. But there's a take up of space of people in the whole tech, internet business world, and there's a lot going on in companies that are in the electrical vehicle industry.
Yeah.
And helium and hydrogen and carbon capture. There are a lot of new companies or rebranded companies that are very active in those areas, and Calgary seems to be attracting a lot of them. Some of it's dangling a financial carrot to get them to come here on the tech side, partly the province and partly the city. And the reality of the oil patch, which is doing great. I mean, post-pandemic, the world is using, it used to be about 91 million barrels a day, and now it's around 95 million. So there hasn't been a cutback. There's been an increase as the economies get going again around the world, and Alberta is doing very well at eventually getting pipelines built to get more capacity to get oil out of our market that doesn't just go south. And we're doing well financially as a province, so that's good news. But most of the energy companies realize that with everything from carbon taxes, carbon capture initiatives, everybody around the world and around the country is looking to Alberta, because as much as we've been badmouthed by a lot of people and places, it's been mostly political, that Alberta somehow is making dirty oil, the oil sands. People don't like us to call it tar sands because it's a convenient, almost a swear word to them. The reality is Alberta's oil is cleaner than everybody else's oil, and cleaner not just environmentally. The only reason our emissions have been going up is because we've been producing more out of oil sands in particular rather than conventional resources. So that makes us a bit of a easy target, because yes, there's more emissions in total volume, but the volume of oil being produced in Alberta that we all benefit from as Albertans, because it's our oil in the ground, has been enormous. So how do we harness that engine of the economy better and use less of it here and also produce it better and safer, great environment, great democratic government, compared to what many people call dirty oil because of the regime that the people are in Middle East and other places where a lot of oil that gets consumed in North America comes from. So it's a challenging time.
It's interesting.
Now, back into my flipping around about the industrial market. All of this growth, in-migration, the companies are here. Yes, they're taking up some office space, but everybody that makes something is doing it in industrial space. And the industrial market, in terms of new development, has been hotter than a firecracker for the last couple of years. And if you've got a large user coming to town, they're looking at new buildings that right now there's just a piece of dirt and a site sign, please leave space, or there's some steel going up. But in terms of large pockets of vacancy that we were experiencing 2, 3, 4 years ago, has just evaporated. So now people are building on spec. Landlords are finding tenants are expanding, so they don't necessarily have a tenancy, but they know it's smart to build a new building. This kind of demand historically in Alberta and other markets is sort of like the opposite of a canary in the coal mine. It's not a sign of trouble, it's a sign of goodness. So if the industrial vacancy is falling and industrial developers are building more space as fast as they can, that's a good sign that other things are going right in the economy locally. And I think there's a lot of other evidence that that's happening in Calgary. So the problem is office space and how people office, and I think a new regime for a lot of landlords. And interestingly, we were talking about this before we went on air, the Calgary's got this city-funded program with tax dollars being provided to people to redevelop old bad buildings that aren't attracting tenants anymore, rather than
office spaces, right?
Yeah, rather than knocking them down, sending them to landfill and making a park or building a new modern piece of housing. They're spending inordinate amounts of money, in my view, unwisely so, to gut and retrofit an office building into a residential building. The way these things are designed and engineered by architects and mechanical engineers, they will all tell you that just it's not the same kind of thinking at all, whether it's parking structures, whether it's the column grid, the floor to ceiling sandwich of concrete and steel and mechanical and electrical. It's just a totally different way of thinking, where you locate elevators, where you locate plumbing risers so that you can supply bathrooms and so on. Is totally different because they're very concentrated, usually around an elevator core in an office building, and they're distributed around a floor plate for residential because all the apartments need all this.
Showers,
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it seems simple to talk about, but it's extremely complicated and expensive to rip stuff out and build it new within the skeleton of an old building. And these are not historically significant old classic buildings you'd hate to knock down. They're old school construction methodology, and some of them are a bit of a blight. But it's a way of the city making noise like they're doing something good. But whether they're doing something good or not, I don't know. Because the bulk of the downtown office building marketplace is owned by 5 or 6 major landlords that are pension funds, real estate investment trusts, or public companies. They've got very deep pockets. They've got large portfolios in all classes of commercial real estate across the country, and in many cases across the globe. So to say, of our office portfolio, if they make a pie chart, the little wedge is called Calgary, and they've got a vacancy problem at the moment, and it's not a big problem for them to carry, not like it was in the 1980s, where we had a lot of failed local developers being foreclosed on because of the high vacancy rate and the tough economy in the 1980s. It's a totally different kind of dynamic going on today. So the owners are solid, and they have a period of trouble in Calgary. And the smart ones are doing good things about filling their vacancies at market rates, and the ones that are sitting on their hands not doing that have a higher vacancy rate.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Office conversions. It made me think of like a rough-in of a floor. There'd be only a small, a certain washroom area, but there wouldn't be enough for showers and all these different units for residential.
But great work for you, Kevin. Your company could get hired by all these people redeveloping bad office buildings into new housing. And to be fair to the people that are doing this and the people that are going into these retrofitted buildings, I mean, they're getting financial help from the city and sometimes from other sources. But they're doing some things that are interesting that hasn't been done in downtown Calgary for a long time. Is they're creating low-cost, affordable housing for young people and for other people with a wide range of needs, but generally poverty or underemployment is their problem. And now there's housing being created for them in the downtown area, where one of the problems all downtowns have is, well, where does everybody go after 5 o'clock? I mean, people go to the suburbs. So if you've got people living and working downtown or participating in social programs or recreation downtown, that's good for a downtown. But this is not a unique to Calgary problem. It's a challenge in all markets.
For sure. Yeah, I actually seen an article of offices in New York City that have that same issue. They're like, oh, what should we do about all these buildings? Well, and the issues that the offices spaces have versus the residential, like not enough sunlight, not good ventilation, stuff for someone to live inside. So that's kind of interesting. Well, I think something that I don't know much about. Well, I need to learn more about.
I think that's true, Kevin. I mean, I love New York as well. I know you've been there a time or two. I've been there a number of times. It's a marvelous city. And we look at what's going on, things I've learned from IFMA and other organizations that I follow that are in that space. They've got some great successes right now and some great failures. But probably the ones that are catching the greatest news are the Amazons and large Facebooks and so on. They've taken enormous office positions in Manhattan and in other boroughs of New York, and they're retreating. They've taken on huge amounts of space, and the new projects that have been done there in sort of the wharf areas in the new buildings in downtown New York. Beautiful success stories, and everybody's going there in massive new buildings, and they're just not filling up quite the way they'd hoped. And that's a byproduct of the pandemic and financial ups and downs in that city. But it's still a very strong market. It's an exciting place to be.
Yeah.
Not at all like Calgary's story at all. I mean, Calgary, as we all should be proud to know, is one of the most livable cities in the world. I think we're number 4 in the world.
Yeah, it's pretty high. I think
number
2
one
or actually 1 or 3 or I don't know.
I think we're number
2.
one or 2 in North America. Vancouver always rates really high, but we're up against Geneva and places like that in Europe. I mean, on a global scale, Calgary's got so much going for it, and it's young, it's smart, it's well educated. We make high incomes, and again, we've got things that are drawing people back to Calgary, which we lost for a while there, for a few years, and it's returning. So that's good news.
For sure. I know we covered it a little bit already, like in your past answer, but what would you say distinguishes the Calgary commercial real estate market versus the rest of Canada and their markets?
Oh, that's a lovely question. Thank you for that good setup that I helped give you. Well, I mean, Calgary's market, whether you take it by asset classes of different grades of office product or industrial or retail, is dramatically different than the other major markets in Canada. It's in the top tier of favorites for investors, large pension funds and real estate investment trusts and life insurance companies that invest in real estate for a whole bunch of really good reasons for how you run a pension fund or a real estate investment trust. Yeah, because you're saving money for a rainy day because you've got to pay pensions to people and so on. So it's a very solid environment. But most major cities in Canada, like Toronto, Vancouver, they sort of have many downtowns. I mean, there's a concentration of office, sort of a central city in Toronto, but there is in Mississauga and Markham and a number of other sort of submarkets within the greater city. Calgary, we have a suburban south, suburban north office product, but Beltline's sort of like the shoulder of downtown. Everything's concentrated here. You go to a similar city.
Concentrated downtown or southeast?
No, downtown.
Okay.
In terms of the overall office space in Calgary, it's a downtown market. You go to Houston if you want to compare, or Denver, that are both oil industry driven cities in many respects. They have many cities. They have many areas of concentration.
Oh, really?
But part of that is rapid transit and ring roads and things like that.
Okay.
But people tend to be where their like companies are located.
So the offices are spread out more.
Well,
throughout the city.
Yeah, they're broken into different components. So that's one part of it. And the other is it's a head office equation. If you look at Vancouver, there are lots of head offices in Vancouver, lots of head offices in Toronto, and quite a number in Montreal as well.
Okay.
But there are no oil and gas industry head offices in those cities. They're in Calgary. So the head offices in Toronto, you have banks and insurance companies and, shall we say, old traditional users. The tech companies, they're in the suburbs of Ottawa and Toronto, Montreal and Vancouver, and now a lot of them in Calgary.
Okay.
And as we know and we learned painfully, or maybe not painfully during the pandemic, they can operate from anywhere. It's a plug-and-play world. You don't have to be in an office tower in a downtown environment. And particularly with a younger demographic of employees that a lot of tech companies are attracting, they want to be where they can have fun and be productive. And sometimes some people, that's in a downtown kind of environment, but more like a college dorm environment sometimes in terms of the amenities that they have, as opposed to a traditional, formal office or even a bullpen or a cube farm, as we call them, in a traditional business office environment. So the environment within offices and within buildings that attracts that younger tech industry employee is not the traditional office towers of downtown Toronto or downtown Vancouver, and maybe downtown Calgary as well. So some landlords have done a great job of remaking their buildings to accommodate them better. Aspen Properties redid the old Pan-Canadian buildings, now called the Edison. They also redid Sun Life Plaza when they acquired that. It's 3 towers, and it's called the Ampersand.
Who was that? Who was the developer?
Aspen Properties.
Ashton?
Aspen.
Okay.
They wouldn't want you to say it wrong, Kevin. ASPEN.
Got it.
great company. Their sole business is office properties in Calgary and Edmonton, period. That's all they do. And they do it really, really well. And they're a good alternative to some of the more traditional national landlords. So that's one thing that distinguishes Calgary from the other markets.
Got it.
And the other, I think, is what the economy does. I mean, when the economy of the country goes up or down, it's more general. It's financial. It's governments. It's deficits, inflation. The buzzwords that we all hear and read in the headlines. Whereas Calgary's ups and downs, booms and busts, have almost always been historically, and I think they are again, driven by the oil patch, oil and gas. Now, the province needing to diversify industries has been an issue since the early days of the Peter Lougheed government in the 1970s. It's been an effort to do that, but the reality is all the diversification in the world that we've done in Alberta, we're still so largely influenced by the price of oil and gas because it makes good times for oil companies or energy companies or poor ones. They are diversifying now. I'm going to jump ahead and give an answer to one of your later questions on your list. If I may, I was at the petrochemical conference called Petrochem West the other day. They do two of these a year, one in Sarnia and one in Calgary.
Okay.
Spring in Calgary, fall in Sarnia. So it was some really
Not Narnia.
Really, really interesting people, and if nerds who don't know how to wear a suit, people that are in tech industries that support the petrochemical industry, or people that are petrochemical processors, the big ones like Nova, are there and presenting their
Was it the Petroleum Club, right?
Pardon me?
Calgary Petroleum Club, or
No.
Where was it?
Where was this conference? It was at the Westin Hotel up at the airport. They got a little conference center there. The honor I had of being there as a guest was to introduce the keynote speaker, a fellow named Ian McGregor, who in I can't remember the year, but he had some boom and bust times of his own as an entrepreneur. Lost it all in the NEP days of the 1980s and started over and built companies and made hundreds of millions of dollars and sold companies and made more.
What was his name again?
Ian McGregor.
Ian McGregor, okay.
And on the subject of diversification, and this is back in the time when Ed Stelmach was Premier of Alberta. And Stelmach, like Lougheed, believed that diversification was the way of the future for Alberta. We shouldn't just be hewers of wood and drawers of water and pull that oil and gas out of the ground and ship it somewhere else, that we should do some processing in the petrochemical area in Alberta. And he believed that we should build a refinery. So north of Edmonton, called the Industrial Heartland area. Ironically, it was Ed Stelmach's riding. But anyway, it was near the refinery row of east and northeast Edmonton, and not too far from Redwater and Fort Saskatchewan, where there are lots of other petrochemical industries. So right in the middle of that area, they bought land. Okay. They raised money. It was the first refinery to be developed in North America in 35 years. Oh, and he did this during the big recession in 2008. This thing has been built and it's up and running. Interpipeline have another refinery that does polyethylene across the street from this. But this refinery is basically to refine bitumen into diesel, except for the part that's getting into green to blue hydrogen now and carbon capture, which he talked about as well. But Ian was the guy who started that. It's now been built, it's operational, it's been financed, it's been sold. The government of Alberta's energy marketing organization owns 50%, and CNRL, a Calgary-based company, owns 50%.
Oh, wow. So the government owns half, CNRL owns half.
See, a lot of the oil sands companies don't pay their royalties in cash. They pay them in bitumen. A certain number of barrels of bitumen equals the royalties.
Oh, wow.
So the Alberta government...
So they pay the government in oil. Bitumen. I think. Is that what it is?
It depends on... Yeah, bitumen is partially refined oil sand is. It's in a slurry that can flow through a pipe. The
Wow.
so,
Okay.
so Alberta, as a government, and we as citizens are benefiting not just from the royalty that's paid in the form of bitumen, because it's got a dollar value, but we earn the upgraded value when that's refined and sold. So
Nice. Like a profit.
and it's a very expensive undertaking to build these plants. They cost many billions of dollars, but in the long run, it's looking like a good thing. So
Okay.
partly because I know the people that are organizing the conference, partly because I have some public speaking skill, I was invited to be the speaker who would introduce Ian
Wow.
McGregor. So I got to do a lot of research and chatting with him about that. So it's a ton of fun to do. Wonderful man to meet. He's 73 years old, and he's working on a new project. They're going to build 4 blue hydrogen projects in North America.
He's a young man.
Well, he thinks like one, and he's just a remarkable guy. So it was a ton of fun to do. Wow. Sorry, I bumped the microphone, made some noise here.
But the power of networking, everyone. Like I shared last week in last episode, that's Mark is showcasing his power of networking. We're going to go into how he promoted his business soon, but just want to share that, how he networked with Ian McGregor, met some top executives in the oil and gas industry, is all through networking. So pointing that out.
Well, I don't know if you call it networking as much as, I said, do you have a speaker to introduce him? And they said, no, we hadn't planned on that. And I said, well, I think you should, and I think I should do it. Now, I didn't charge them for it, but it was a great audition for that audience. So maybe some of the people in the audience will hire me to help them downsize their office space.
But if you didn't know him, you couldn't have done that, right? Like
Well, I think something that a lot of young people in our business and many businesses forget is that they can write someone a letter, or they can pick up the phone and call them. And you might have to deal with some gatekeepers who answer the phone.
Right.
But if you see them as an enemy, you're going to have trouble getting past the gatekeeper. But if you see them as your ally, that you've got something of value to add and deliver to the person you're trying to reach.
For sure, yeah.
Like maybe you went to their website. Maybe you looked at their annual report to find out what's important to their company this year, where they're going. And you call up that office and say, I'd like to speak to Mr. or Ms. Jones that runs the company. My name is Bob Smith, and I work for ABC Company. I have a message and a product and a service that I'd like to talk to this particular person about. And you have a short plan of what you're going to talk to that person about. They might say, he'd love to talk to you, but he's really busy, or she'd like to talk to you, but that's an important thing on our agenda. So let me introduce you to or connect you with someone else. I mean, you can get indoors that way sometimes, but sometimes you meet people at different events. And this event we were talking about, I was sitting at a table with a bunch of people. I met people from a number of different organizations where I went away with a pocket full of business cards. I'll be following up with them, whether they become readers of one of my publications or clients that need me to help them with their office space, or they want to sell their house. I can help them. But when you meet people in a different context than where you're regularly knocking on doors trying to sell you your service, I think you have a lot less resistance. People are like, if I went into a room full of real estate people and tried to pick their brains on their office requirements, I mean, why am I asking? Right? I mean, you set yourself up for a bit of an adversarial contest of trying to get into the door. But I was at a table with 6 people, and in the course of conversations over the lunch hour, before I was getting up to do my introduction, I not only met people, I got their business cards, I asked them what they do, and the first thing out of their mouth was where they're based, how large their operation is in Calgary, and how many people they employ. Well, in my business, how many people somebody employs immediately translates to a certain amount of office space they occupy. So where are you? What building are you in? So it fosters that kind of conversation. I wasn't there to talk to them about real estate, but I was there to meet them and find out what they do and why their company is an important player.
For sure. That's actually why I like events, because everything's warm. It's not like, hey, who's this guy at my door? Like a random cold caller or door knocker soliciting. Doesn't he see the sign? But then versus an event where, hey, everyone's like, hey, everyone pays the same amount of money to be there. They're at a table. They're enjoying drinks. It's more warm and friendly to meet people at these events, I find.
Well, it is a lot. There's one other thing I noticed. Of course, pandemic time frame, who was attending events? We weren't doing that. We were just doing online things. But I used to, go to conferences, and you'd be sitting at a table of 8 or 10 people, and everybody's got a glass of water and some promotional stuff that's left on the table by the organizers, and a pad of paper and a pen, at every spot. And most of the tables at this conference, there were at least 3 laptops open or tablets, and people were making notes, or they were sending emails, and there were distractions certainly, but other people were using technology to record things, or make a note of something and send a note to somebody. Hey, talk to this person who just presented on a subject. So it's an interesting dynamic, because when they're glued to their tablet and they're glued to their laptop, their one eye is on the presenter on the stage, and their one ear is over there, and the rest of their focus is on their device. So I think it gives you a different kind of experience attending a conference. And certainly if you're glued to device, you're not engaged in conversations or sidebars with the people at your table. So it's an interesting opportunity for an old guy like me, Kevin, instead of a young guy like you.
Yeah, I don't like using a laptop for notes, especially at an event. I like just like this, paper and pen. Yeah. It's natural. Well, I don't know. I like it.
You got to remember, though, a lot of the people at this conference are engineers.
Okay.
And, you can tell. You know how you tell the difference between an introverted engineer and an extroverted engineer?
No.
Yeah. The extroverted engineer, when he's talking to you, looks at your shoes instead of his own shoes. That's a funny inside engineering joke there, Kevin. You should enjoy that. What's our next question?
Okay. Didn't get the joke, but all right. I'll laugh later. I get it.
Well, okay. You get it now?
No, I don't.
Engineers are very introverted. They're very shy, and they're nerdy, and their brain works a different way. So the joke is that they're introverted. They look down at their shoes when they talk to you, because they don't want to make eye contact.
Oh.
So the joke is extroverted engineer looks at your shoes instead of his own shoes.
Gotcha.
I'll write it down for you, Kevin.
All right.
I'll email it to you. What's the next question?
Okay, so kind of going into networking as well. We've already covered, Petrochem, how you met Mr. Ian. Let's move into branding, because that's the one thing I truly respect and admire about Mark, is his marketing and branding skill. I would love to pivot now into the marketing aspect, and I'd love to ask you, how has branding helped your business?
Well, if I'm asked the question that way, my answer is not much at all. I currently work with the Maxwell organization. I've been with Maxwell Capital Realty for 20 years. Prior to that, I was with Colliers International for 12 years. And before that, I was with several other firms during the course of my real estate industry career. And I always felt that my clients worked with me because of me, the services I deliver, and the way I do it, as opposed to the label on my business card or the sign over the door. So I tend to think the branding that you do is connected to the company you work for, or the logo, or the name of the house you work under. But the branding that converts to successful marketing and effective connections with people is who you are, how people know about you and what you bring to the table, your organization, and that you're prepared to not so much be the go-getter. I love that old phrase, but I've learned to despise it. A go-getter is just on a treadmill, running hard, working hard all the time, because they want to get something, right? It's the cold call. Hey, I want to do business. I want your business. I want your, where do we bring the paperwork so you can press hard 3 copies and we'll do a deal. And that's really old school selling. So if you're selling something, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's your personal services somehow, whatever business you're in, or profession you're in, or the services your company delivers, or your products that your company delivers. If somebody wants to give you the time of day and cultivate a relationship with you so they'll be loyal to you or give you a chance to compete for their work, then they have to have a reason. And I think that reason is not that you drive a fancy car or you have a great haircut. Kevin and I have matching haircuts, incidentally. We go to the same stylist. But
mine's nicer.
But I said some of the old school Mad Men era, if some of your audience members may recall that TV show, or that, and some of us like me remember that era actually because we were there. But the thing I find has best been defined in this description that was given to me in a course I took. It said, the connection you make with people, the quality of the connection, has a lot to do with the degree to which you deliver more value to them than it costs them to pay you for what you do, whether that's advice or products or whatever. So my best lessons in branding, I moved back to Calgary in 1999. I had been in Edmonton for 27 years, and I moved back to Calgary. I knew my business, but I didn't know very many people because the people I went to high school with in Calgary are, all over the planet now. So I needed to get to know people, and of course, I knew office buildings and industrial buildings, but I needed to meet landlords. I needed to meet the physical product that I would be working with in terms of doing office leasing and industrial leasing. But I didn't have any clients. How would I get to know people? And I had, prior to 99, I had been playing around experimentally in Edmonton with doing a newsletter on a regular basis. And I was.
So you had no clients in Calgary, though?
Oh,
in Edmonton you had some.
Yeah. I was with Colliers in Edmonton. I got into what turned out to be a short, unhappy and unsuccessful second marriage. That's what brought me back to Calgary. So I brought my skill set. I knew how to do my business. I just didn't have any contacts or customers. So I'd been playing around with newsletters. So I established Facility Calgary. It's almost 24 years ago now that we started that with. I think I had email addresses of just under 400.
Okay.
And the production quality of that first newsletter was pretty dodgy by today's standards. And fast forward to today, we have a website called facilitycalgary.com where the current week's newsletter is there. The archived ones going back many, many years, archives of interviews I've done with people are there. And as we've grown, it becomes costly to do. So we've got advertiser sponsors you'll see their ads in the center column on the website. And we also distribute a newsletter. So the fresh page that's on that website as the current week's issue every Tuesday morning is there. And an email goes out to our readership at 6 o'clock on Tuesday morning.
Very consistent, by the way. He's never failed. And I read it.
Don't say that, Kevin. That's bad.
It's a valuable thing, though. It's a valuable podcast, or not a podcast,
a
newsletter that he is creating.
But
very powerful.
It goes out in email format that you can read on your phone or your tablet or your desktop. And every section on it, if you want to, you can click and you're at a full page of the website to view it either way. Yeah. So it's been a lot of fun. But what I've done and where it's evolved, and it wasn't conceived successfully on day one this way, it just has evolved, is we got a number of sections there that the news is important to our readership.
Okay.
And it's not just under 400 right now. We've got 40,000 people on our mailing list, 29,000 opens every week. It's
29,000.
Yeah. Now, most of those people are in Calgary, but there are also a lot of people, because the newsletter is focused on both real estate and oil and gas and business generally and a bit of politics. We have readers that are in other markets that they're interested in the Calgary market. So the commercial real estate ownership and financing world in North America, Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, Chicago, New York, Houston, We get
wow.
lots of readers
Really?
from those markets because they are either interested in what's going on in Calgary because they own buildings here, they own companies here, or they do business with companies that do here.
Wow. So readers in the States, that's where some of them are.
Well, the greater Calgary area is about 65%, and 35% is all over the place. So we have a lot of people in London and Scotland. There's a lot of oil and gas business in the North Sea area. Those companies are interested in what goes on in Calgary. It's been great.
Wow.
Next question.
If you haven't, subscribed to this yet, I know we'll talk about it more later, but this newsletter is a great newsletter. I check it every Tuesday whenever it comes in, and it has been a source of value for me. There's so much information on people who were appointed to their new position, people who left their position, people, big major deals, real estate deals, some oil and gas deals, really interesting stuff that helps me think bigger than myself. I love to read this. Like even in the morning, I read this and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be one of these guys. $1 billion deals one day.
Well, some people want to tune in to find out who's been appointed or disappointed, fired or retired. And we find that, the eyeballs go to a particular part of the site. And other people are interested in the latest news, what's going on in terms of big deals. Some are interested in real estate stuff. Some people are interested in that little section where they could hire me to speak at their event or hire me to be their real estate agent or sign up for newsletters I publish. So I'm happy about that. And we have advertisers who've been very supportive of us. They have their ads there. They have links to how people can connect with them. So we're very grateful to have the brand association, if you will. Yeah. My brand, you're talking about branding, my brand Facility Calgary is tied to Mark's brand, Mark Kolke. It's also tied to the Maxwell Realty Organization. There are many Maxwell brokerages around the province, and Maxwell Capital Realty is one of a handful of brokerages in Calgary. We've got 180 agents working under our brokerage. So some of them are like me. They do largely commercial. Most do largely residential, and some do both, as I do. So it's a great umbrella organization. But my brand, Facility Calgary, and the Monday Morning Minute, and some other things I publish that people will learn about if they go exploring me. They'll find it's about me. It's about the work I do, the kind of clients I work with, the kinds of things that interest me, and I think that people find that valuable. And over the years, it's amazing the number of people who became readers of Facility Calgary first and customers of mine second. And there were a couple of years that just blew me away how many client connections that led to transactions that year that came. Powerful. But then over time, which came first, the chicken or the egg? They become my customer first or my reader first. And you lose contact with that.
I'm guessing reader first. That's my guess. But I know some people want to buy from you first, and and then they sign up after because they learn more, right?
One thing I'd like to talk about, though, for a moment is newsletters in general, because a lot of people are using them and distributing them in lots of ways as a way of marketing, just as you're doing with the podcasts. Everybody's looking at doing new things for them to get their message where they'd like it to go so they get exposure to or brand recognition with someone. I think the key thing with newsletters are the ones that I sign up for or read that interests me. I mean, you're not going to get somebody to subscribe for a newsletter about cameras and photography if they're not really keenly interested in cameras and photography. But if you sell photography or you sell camera equipment or photography equipment, you're going to want to cultivate an audience of those people. Now, you might cultivate an audience of people who travel and take pictures when they travel, that kind of thing. But you need to figure out who you are, what's your channel of stay in your lane, I guess would be a good way to say it, of what defines the name of your newsletter or your brand. How does that connect to what you do? And it's really interesting to publish your poetry, but if you're trying to sell houses, talk about houses. If you're trying to sell oil and gas, don't talk about fairies and flowers. I mean, I hope I've stated the obvious, but you need to focus on what you're doing and not so much what you're trying to sell. but figure out who your audience is and what are they interested in. Are they interested in some humor along with things? Are they interested in are they like those nerdy engineers at that Petrochem West conference where, just the facts, man. Just, give me hard-nosed facts that an engineer can wrap their head around. Because if you tell them a joke about engineers, they won't get it, will they, Kevin? So I guess my advice is if your branding is in a particular genre of the services or products you're trying to sell, make sure that there's a consistent message, that you're not sending this message on Facebook that makes you look like person A, and you've got a website that seems like person B with other businesses or interests, and then you publish a newsletter that just confuses the daylights out of people. So whether your picture's on it or your name's on it or not, if it's your branding, your marketing, your newsletter, it should be harmonized. So, people are looking at one, there should be a link or a reference to the other so they can connect across and but the messages should be consistent. It shouldn't be, here I'm talking about Little League baseball and here I'm talking about photography and now I'm selling an oil and gas industry product. I mean, those may be your interests. Maybe you want to talk about, oh, by the way, I coach my kid's ball team. Well, that's cool. Put some references in it. Do things that are respectful and intelligent, but make the main focus of whether your newsletter is whatever it is you're trying to market, whether it's yourself or your company or your product.
For sure. Like, it has to be aligned. Like what Mark can be saying, and my interpretation of what I'm learning from what Mark is saying is keep it consistent and aligned with your brand and what your customers and clients and partners want versus something that could be totally confusing, because that would lead to unsubscription. When I see something that's like I don't care about in my email, I'm out. I'm like, I don't want to see your stuff. But if it's related to what I'm doing and can benefit me, I'm going to stay and read it. So I'm a very strict unsubscriber, and Mark is totally right about what he said.
Well, thank you for the endorsement, Kevin.
Yes.
I'll just add one little thing about that.
He paid me to say that, by the way.
I want to give a little plug, for Monday Morning Minute. Monday Morning Minute began 4.5 years ago. Two other fellows and I coach public speaking. Jim coaches executives in management, and Gord coaches elite athletes, if you will, or people that are trying to rehab their life or their sport. And we thought, well, let's set up a site and a brand to develop our business and cultivate clients for our respective coaching businesses. And I, of course, thought, well, and it's all going to need some real estate. So it seemed like a good idea. We set up a website, which we found after a year just wasn't that worthwhile. And none of us developed any coaching business, but we were developing connections. And we built a list that started out with a couple hundred addresses. And after 4.5 years, 2 weeks ago, we had 24,400 on that list getting our email every Monday morning, which is 100 words that I write on a subject.
Quote as well.
And the quote is one I research, how do I find a quote that goes with this? And now we're also doing a poll question each week. But we moved this list. It was being hosted by MailChimp, and I was using MailChimp as my service to mail this out. Every Monday morning, 5 a.m. Calgary time, people would get their Monday Morning Minute. We moved it to a new platform, and if anybody is listening to this who's a writer or publisher, and you haven't already checked out Substack, I would suggest you check it out, because I was just blown away by the ease of the technology to use. And just, go Google Mark Kolke Substack, and you'll find the publishing platforms I have there, and you'll find Monday Morning Minute. You'll find some other things. But
you can do newsletters there as well?
Yes. That's essentially how Substack got started.
Okay.
And
nice.
A lot of writers and publishers have gravitated to Substack because it's a really easy-to-use platform, and they have good techniques and algorithms in the background that help you cultivate readers. I thought this switchover is going to unsettle some people, like 24,400. But I loved Substack. I wanted to go to Substack and cancel the costs of that
MailChimp?
volume of people on MailChimp every month, which is about $300. So I'll save the $300 and do it for free. The saving was not the only concern. The concern was how many people will adopt the new platform. From 24,400, we dropped to 24,000. Sorry, I said 24. 22,400 down to 22,190 in 2 weeks. That's all the fall off we had. And since then, it's been climbing. No, 200 drop off. And not, I was
24,000. Then now it's 22,000.
Now you're going to get me tongue-tied, and I'll trip over my dentures. But what happened is that we expected we might lose about 4,000. We lost about 200, 250 in the first couple of weeks. But now we've built back better, and it's back growing. I get a little statistical graph every day of where things are going. So I found it really cool, and I think you'll enjoy Monday Morning Minute too if you go check it out.
I think I checked that out like 2 weeks ago. I have Facility Calgary is my main one. I should check out Monday Morning more. There's a Wednesday one too, isn't there? Wednesday?
No, we just got one.
Two.
On Monday morning, I publish Monday Morning Minute.
Yeah.
On Tuesdays, I publish Facility Calgary. And 7 days a week, I publish a thing called Musings. Mark's Musings. And if you go to Mark Kolke at Substack, you'll find that as well. That's a smaller audience, but been doing that for 20 years, writing a column every day. And I have time still to sell real estate and lease real estate, Kevin. Now, it's amazing what you can do when you're grown up and a grandfather and you're not taking care of wives and children and dogs and the things you have to look forward to in your life.
Yeah. All right. So next question. Let's move in. We're almost time to land the plane. I'm really curious because I want to move back into real estate to give some value to a lot of the young people that follow us into real estate. We have a lot of young people, young men and women that follow us. Maybe you're a real estate agent. Maybe you're a young developer. Maybe you just want to learn about it. Maybe you're an investor. I want to know from Mr. Mark here, what mistakes have you made during your real estate career?
Oh, how many hours do we have, Kevin? I've made tons of mistakes.
What's a big common one or major?
Oh, I think getting too full of yourself. There's a problem in our industry. We call it big dealitis. Somebody does a big deal, and I've had my share of them, but in a career, how many do you do that are really, really big? Massive transactions, massive income, go on vacations, go on shopping sprees, take a few months off work, those kinds of big deals.
Okay.
And when you get big dealitis, two things happen. One is you get really involved because big deals don't happen easily. They usually involve many months or sometimes years of work on a particular situation for a client that's going to lead to a very large transaction and a big payday. So while you're doing that, you're not putting as much business in the pipeline. You don't have things coming along that are in development because you're too distracted and properly distracted and focused on the big deal. And the second thing is your ego takes over and you suddenly think, I can do big deals. I'll call up big important people. I'll write proposals and I'll do things. Well, it's not quite that simple because every relationship that results in a small deal or a big deal, it starts with a relationship. And relationships are sometimes easy to start, sometimes they're difficult to maintain, but if they're good relationships where you care about the person and their company and them and they feel it, you're interested in knowing their kids are in school, what their life is like, where they went on vacation. They're probably going to be more interested in talking to you when 3 months from now you talk, well, so how was that vacation? Did you really enjoy Maui? As opposed to they're just another name on a list to call or a mailing list that you're just another vendor. It's relationships that matter because when people are doing really important things, big transactions, important things, they want to deal with people they know, like, and trust. How do they get to know and like and trust you? Because you got better advertising than someone or fancier brochures or newsletters? Well, that's part of it. They get acquainted with you or your personality or your style, but they don't get to know you. And you do that face-to-face with people. You do that on telephone calls with people. And you do it mixing business mostly, sometimes some fun. It's great to send out a newsletter, but if you never put some humor in there, you're going to be seen as a humorless person.
Stiff.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't get comfortable is something. Don't get comfortable. If you had a big deal, I've made some big deals and I just like hung out for the whole weekend and I forgot to do prospecting or my follow-up for the week. And then I'm like, okay, and now like there goes 2 weeks without any deals, So that's actually a really interesting thing. Always need to fill your pipeline, everyone. Always need to fill it up with something. Even though you have a good big deal, you just made $1 billion. That is the best time for you to make another $1 billion in that same time frame. That same day.
Well, I'm not a billionaire, Kevin. I come from when, $20 was a lot of money. If you found a dime on the street, you picked it up.
Yeah. That's fair. I know what you mean. I know what you mean, but that's just kind of, what I get. You know what I'm saying, though, right? Yeah. So moving into the next question is, what would you give advice for a young person involved in real estate right now?
Well, aside from, be successful and save lots of money. Pardon me, I just need a bit of water here, Kevin. Thank you. Kevin provides water to his guests. And it's just water. Sorry, nothing fancier. Yeah. What was the question again, Kevin?
What advice would you give a young person in real estate?
Do lots of deals, make lots of money, and tuck it away. We tend in our business, salary jobs are great, and sometimes they pay bonuses once a year. But in real estate, you eat what you kill is a phrase that a lot of people use, and it's maybe a bit cruel term to use, but we work hard, and many of the things we work hard at, we don't get paid at. Now, the engineer, the accountant, the lawyer, and the doctor, they work hard at what they do. They get paid every time. In real estate, when we're selling houses or leasing or selling commercial real estate, we get paid commissions on a fee that's paid when the transaction closes. And that might be 90 days down the road from the time you start working on something. It might be a year and 90 days on something else. So when you get your money, there's a tendency to pay off bills and buy a new car and go on vacation. I think the real important lesson, and you learn this by discipline when you start, is you're careful with your money because you need money to put gas in the car. You need money for marketing. You need money to get you through dry spells. So I guess the easy way is start with a lot of money and try to hang on to it during that startup period of time where, you might be a flash in the pan at first. You get some deals because you listed some houses with friends or relatives or whatever. But unless you're developing a clientele and a reputation and a flow of business, it's challenging early on, and it is an expensive business. The cost to get licensed and get in the business, the things you incur with photography and measurements and all these other things you contract out every time you list a property for sale, and the marketing and advertising, whether it's relatively inexpensive online advertising or whether it's bus bench signs and those kinds of more traditional things. It's an expensive business to be in, but it's also a very high income business to be in if you're generating that high income. But until it's consistent, and for new people that first 3 or 4 years, it's usually not. Helps to start with a reserve, have some cash or a spouse or partner with a good bank account or a line of credit. Very often people get into real estate when one partner's working in a salary job and the other one's in real estate, and as a couple, as a family, you can weather the storms better than if you're both in that business. I'm told that's not a good thing. When two real estate agents get together, they just go crazy when good times happen, and they struggle when it's tough times. But
for sure,
balance is important.
Yeah, especially on commission. I know what it's like. And what have you learned about real estate these last 20 years, Mark?
Well, it's interesting. So the last 20 years, I've been back in Calgary for 24. So everything I've learned in Calgary, or in the last 20 years, has been learned in Calgary. And I did an interesting thing, and I wouldn't say, pull up stakes in a market you know and go to one you don't know because you're marrying somebody. But I did. But, my second ex-wife still lives in Calgary, and I live in Calgary. But when I came here, I needed to learn the market because I thought I knew my business. You see, I'd been in Edmonton for many years. I could drive you around. I leased this. I sold that. I mean, I knew the marketplace. I knew the building inventory. I knew businesses, and because I had those relationships over time. Came back to Calgary. I know how to do a lease. I know how to do a purchase. I know how to work with financing and work with buyers and sellers and landlords and tenants. But I didn't know anybody. And I also didn't know I knew what buildings are, but I didn't know specific pieces of real estate. And if you're leasing downtown office space in Calgary or suburban space, you better get to know not only the landlords, but you need to get to know the buildings. So I wore out a lot of shoe leather. But I found I was doing things that I'd taken for granted because I thought I knew them in Edmonton. In Calgary, I didn't know them, and I had to do that digging that a rookie would do. And it was a very good change for me. I got to meet some new people, which always happens when you go into a new marketplace. And I got invited, actually. It's probably close to 21 years ago. From a mailing list I was on, I got things about single people, because when you divorce, see, after the marriage failed, I stayed in Calgary, and you're single. I was on one mail out about things for single people in Calgary. And there was a thing, are you interested in joining a Toastmasters club for singles? And
Wow.
I went to a meeting because I thought, target-rich environment, might meet some interesting women, and I did. But I also learned that Toastmasters was not about fixing toasters or making toast. It was about public speaking, and I've met a lot of people in that world, and I found that my speaking work connected with my writing work. And the better speaker I became, the better writer I became. The better writer I became, the better speaker I became. I've gotten to know a lot of people in that field, both as amateur members of Toastmasters clubs that are social. And there are many of them in Calgary.
So your writing helped your speaking?
Oh, without doubt. And I think anybody who gets up and does any public speaking, even at a Toastmasters club for a few minutes at a crack, or you're doing some platform speaking at a convention, or you're introducing Ian McGregor at a conference, if you're going to do that and do it well, usually you're right. You may make notes, you may rehearse, you might deliver it on a stage as if it's off the cuff, but you planned what you were going to say. You wrote what you're going to say. So you become more deliberate in planning a speech. And the Toastmasters organization is phenomenal at teaching those skills, and it's inexpensive, and it's a good way for people, in sales in particular, who need to get better at talking with people, better at networking people. And for Kevin, for better at dating girls, you trouble approaching them in the bar because you're shy. I mean, public speaking
They love me, man.
helps.
They just come to me like a magnet.
Okay. Magdalene. Anyway, I took Kevin for lunch one time, and I tried to get something going between him and the waitress. She's a lovely young woman. I think he was playing engineers because he was looking at his shoes. But all kidding aside, I met Kevin at a Toastmasters event. It was a contest, and he was competing. And I'd never met Kevin before. And
In the church?
yeah, it was the location was the Miracles Toastmasters Club, and they were hosting this contest where people from other clubs were competing. There were half a dozen clubs in the contest, and Kevin was a representative of his club from Mount Royal University at the time, as I recall. And I'd never seen him before. I'd heard about this new guy, Kevin. You got to hear him. So I was there. I heard Kevin, and I was just blown away. I mean, he's improved a great deal since then, but he was out of the gate as a rookie. He was just incredible, and I'll tell you why. It's one of the reasons why I like Kevin so much. I was telling somebody the other day, I was doing a podcast with Kevin, and who was Kevin, how had I met him, so I explained how I had. And Kevin, I mean, if he's talking about something he doesn't care about, he doesn't do a very good job. But when Kevin's telling a story, he's a really good storyteller. He tells personal stories. He tells stories that have impact and meaning for his audience. And when he does, and you're in the audience and he's on the stage, you can hear a pin drop in the room. And it's not just because he's got a really great radio voice, which he does, but he's got a lot of passion. He's a lot of energy. And he laughs a lot and he smiles a lot and he has fun. Like, you've gotten to know him. But deep down inside, there's a boy in there. There's a man in there. There's somebody with a heart. And there's somebody with experiences with joy and with pain. And when he speaks, you feel it. This man delivers it. And whether you're his friend or whether you're his customer, this guy's hardworking and serious and will glad hand you and smile at everybody. But if he's on a stage and you're in his audience, you haven't cried in a while, get ready because Kevin will reach in and pluck some heartstrings for you. So I'm very proud to know him, and I've seen him in action. I'm not just making this up because he paid me, because he didn't. But for anybody who's always wondered about trying Toastmasters, or you just don't have the courage to go into a room like that, call me or call Kevin. I'll take you. I'll introduce you. Kevin will take you. He'll introduce you. And you'll learn that it's a threshold worth crossing. You meet some marvelous people. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark, for those kind words. I'm very honored and humbled to hear. Thank you. Yes.
How are we doing for time? We got time for more questions? Or are we?
We're about to land the plane. We're over time a little bit, but no worries. We added so much value.
Kevin's going to edit out a few minutes of me. I'm sure of that.
I think I'm going to post the whole episode. I just feel like there's so much value here, and I know we had fun. So.
Well, you had fun, did you? Okay.
I had fun. Yeah.
And you learned an engineer's joke.
All right. So, lastly, as we close off the meeting or close off this podcast today, episode 22, Mark, what would you say is the next step, and how do you want our viewers and listeners to connect with you next?
Well, if you're interested in knowing me because you like me, call me up, write to me, email me. If you go to facilitycalgary.com, or if you go to Google Maxwell Capital Realty, Mark Kolke, you'll find my Google page, you'll find my website. It's all there. Dial my phone, 403-312-8359. That's my cell phone. And if I'm not answering, well, I'm busy. But I'll do my best to get back to you. And my primary email for business is Kolke, Kolke. So Kevin, you spelled it wrong there. Back at Kolke, that's my surname, at Mark Kolke. So there's two K's there, MarkKolke.com. And
yes, I'll put it down below as well.
Okay, cool.
Just click the information down below.
So most of the residential work I do, representing sellers or buyers, I do in cooperation with other agents in our office that work in different parts of the city or different property types. I'm working with a colleague, something we're not ready to launch yet, Kevin, but maybe you'll have me back when we do. Jeremy Mutton and I are heading up, we'll just call it a new home builder service group. So we're going to be cultivating relationships with new home builders to list their homes that they're building in a pretty cool way. So we've got a team of agents that can work with us on that, on marketing those homes for sale, because of course that often produces leads of people who they like that open house at that new home, but they really want to buy something else. So we have a strategy to help them, and a strategy to help new home builders, particularly the small ones, the ones that do infill work in the center of the city, to help them acquire sites for redevelopment and so on. So that's coming up. Cool. Did I answer the question?
Yeah. So just to recap, everyone, to get in touch with Mark, I'll put his website and email and address, not his address, but his email and his phone number below. So get in touch with him there. Mark is a good man to know and to have in your corner. He's been in my corner for such a long time, and truly honored and humbled to have him have my back. And we always have lunch and chat and joke around. And I always learn something new. And being my age, 28, it's really great to learn from someone who's more ahead and more experienced than me. So,
well, one of the things Kevin has learned is that when you shave your head, and let's be honest, Kevin and I don't need we don't need to shave our heads. Just as the top part is pink, so we match it. We just shave the whole works. Kevin's working on a beard, and I suggest that he might get a theatrical one because the one he's working on is pretty sparse. But anyway, the key of shaving your head is you always look younger than you actually are. How old do you think I am, Kevin?
60.
60. A gal at
55.
A gal at our office recently said she thought I was 58, and I wanted to buy her lunch. She said, I'll be 72 in August, Kevin.
Holy man.
Yeah, I got kids and grandkids and ex-wives, and I got lots of experiences in my past. But no, I'm feeling more young than old, more than ever, and the next 20 or 30 years are going to be great. I mean, Warren Buffett's 96. Oh, he's a billionaire too, but I think that he's still working and doesn't believe in retirement. I don't know what I'll be saying when I'm 96, but for the next 20 or 30 years, I'm having fun writing every day, working every day, and helping people with their real estate requirements.
Love it. Awesome.
Oh, and I hang out on podcasts or radio shows like Kevin's.
Awesome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast, proudly sponsored by the Pircon Group, commercial construction experts. Glad to be here today. Feel free to reach out if there's anything our team can do for you in terms of commercial construction. Happy to help. Reach out to Mark as well if you want to get in touch regarding his commercial and residential services. And please make sure to check out his newsletter, facility, and also Monday motivation, because that will pump you up and get you ready, especially when Tuesday comes around and you see these big, massive deals, and it'll encourage you like it really encourages me to aim big and aim high. So thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. My name's Kevin with Pircon Group, and I have Mark here. Have a great day, and
thank you.
Stay dangerous.
Nice to talk to you all.